Dude, that one of Zach's is spot on. Texas Brewing is live.
Nice.
Yeah, audio's hot.
Audio is hot.
Hot.
It's what?
Hot.
I was what?
What?
All right, see if I can leave it on this time.
And then that red Sue.
Open that one,
Sue.
All right, if Stubby can not pin any comments, I'll be able to see the comments.
We are recording.
We're recording.
We are live.
Uh-oh.
And ready to go.
All right, we are back from the break.
Hello.
That was our house band again, the Many Colored Death out of Columbia, Missouri. Make sure you go check them out on Spotify and on iTunes. Good friend of mine, Brent Moore. They're just a fantastic band. If you're anywhere in the or the central Missouri area, make sure you check them out if you get a chance. Really an excellent band, especially live. So we appreciate them letting us use the music for our breaks there. So we're going to get into a discussion on some of the lighter Belgian styles. We've gone heavy a few episodes now.
Right. High alcohol, a lot of yeast character, whatnot.
Which is, a lot of the Belgian styles, that's just what they are. They're bigger beers and very, very big in terms of flavor and alcohol and just overall impression. So these are ones I'm not real familiar with.
Right.
I haven't drank a lot of blondes.
Because they're not as much fun.
Well, actually, the two that I've got in front of me here are changing my mind on that. I think
they're really easy to drink, and that's I
Yeah.
think the key there. I think often enough too, you'll find that when you go out to find something that's not a dark strong or a saison or a triple or golden strong, something that is the big beast beer or a double even, which a whole nother territory as far as flavor goes.
Yeah.
It's more of it's going to be classified as a Belgian pale ale.
Yeah.
More than likely, it's going to be something like La Chouffe or something like the IPAs type of, like a Belgian IPA. It's like very hoppy and still strong in, as far as alcohol goes and whatnot, and maybe pretty tame, a little more tame as far as the yeast character.
These are like bursting with yeast character.
Yes.
I mean, it absolutely, as much as yeast character takes a strong part in the flavor of other Belgians, it's all yeast flavor.
Right.
I think.
Light-bodied, easy, but without that alcohol warmth typically.
Right.
So, overall impression of a Belgian blonde ale, which is what we're starting with here. A moderate strength golden ale that has a subtle, fruity, spicy Belgian yeast complexity, slightly malty, sweet flavor, and a dry finish. And I think what we have on the table in front of us, we're starting with is the Leffe Blonde, which is a classic version of this, classic example. And our own Zach's Belgian Blonde, which he won a second place with at the last Blue Bonnet. And honestly, these two are in very much the same range. I think that these exemplify what we just described as far as there's not a lot of alcohol in this, but yet it has that sort of soft character with all of that yeast on top of it that it just drives that spicy
and it's just like yeast flavor. It really is. Zach, why don't you talk to us about your approach in brewing something like this?
It's been a while since I brewed it, but I started with when I first started brewing, this is one of the first styles that I started brewing, and it's out of brewing classic styles. I've tweaked the recipe just a little bit over time. It usually came out higher gravity than what the recipe stated, but so I always call it the panty dropper, and the girls love this one.
I could see that. One of the things,
so subtle.
It's very approachable style.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is yours is very approachable. When I've had these in the past, I thought that the yeast character is so prominent and it's so bright and fruity and all, and it's very complex that it actually can take some people off guard. I tell this to people when they're drinking stouts for the first time. Like, don't put that cup to your mouth thinking that you're going to taste beer. Put it to your mouth thinking you're going to taste coffee, and you're going to have a much better impression of it. Well, there's nothing that you can say to prepare somebody for the flavors you get out of some of these Belgian blondes and that kind of thing. In the past, that's been one of the things that's made them difficult for me to drink before I really became, when I knew I liked craft beer but wasn't really into it, is it's really a completely unique set of flavors that just really hits you right in the mouth. And yours is very approachable and very balanced. There's a nice floral character to it. I like that a lot. I don't know if that's from yeast or from hops.
What yeast did you use? Do you remember?
I have to look at my notes. Give me a minute. I'll pull it up.
Probably like the Abbey or something along those lines. Somewhere in that range of a.
I think 1214 comes to mind.
Okay.
1214 is just like the Abbey ale, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. Aroma: light, earthy, or spicy hop nose, along with a lightly grainy sweet malt character. Shows a subtle yeast character that may include spicy phenolics, perfume, or honey-like alcohol, or yeasty, fruity esters. Commonly orange-like or lemony. I would say we get that out of both the Leffe and Zach's.
Definitely, yeah.
If you haven't poured, we have. I don't know if the Maretsu that we have here is quite. It's Maretsu Blonde, but I'm not sure if it fits quite as. This is what I could find today. So, I feel like this.
Stubby was
when you
saying,
try
these are
this,
getting
you're
harder
going to
to
feel
find.
like this. The Maretsu to me tastes like it was. It's old. And
Pouring it looks like it's old.
It's
the
old
color.
and it tastes to me a little oxidized and it's really dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The
That's
yeast-
just terrible.
The
Yeah.
yeast was 1214 Belgian ale.
Okay,
White.
Belgian ale.
Yeah.
All right.
It's mostly Pilsen.
Oh, that
Little bit
poor
of wheat.
Maretsu. It's like going to a
Yeah,
funeral.
that did suck.
You can when you pour it and look at the color, you can tell that it's old just from the color.
It's,
of it.
I don't know how old, but definitely there because it's almost
Uh,
amber in comparison.
It says
Or it
best
should be-
before on the bottle of 04-2013.
Oh, hey, there you
Best
go.
before April of 2013.
Thanks, Total Wine.
Go ahead and check that for me there. That might be, say, 2015.
The appearance of light to deep
No, I
gold
think you're
color, and I don't know that one's gone past that even, but the other two totally fit within that range. Large,
No,
dense, and
you're
creamy
right,
white
dude.
off to off-white head. That's Zach's when Zach's poured, man. That thing was perfect. That had the perfect amount of carbonation and whatnot.
That's got to make that a 5-year-old bottle of beer.
Yeah,
It tastes like it too. That poor beer.
that's all paper, right there.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It smells wonderful.
One of the things that I am impressed by a lot when we talk about these Belgian styles, when we get into the particular things like triples and quads and the blondes, is that when you taste homebrewed versions of Belgian beers, I think that it's one of these things that is the basic thinking is that they're very easy to make.
Right.
Because you don't need as much temperature control, whether or not that's true. That's the thought process on it. And when you taste a really well-made Belgian beer, like what Zach has got here or the Leffe or whatever, you realize that they're not just an easy thing to brew. They're their own set of balance, their own set of intentional particular flavors that you're trying to pull out of the yeast. And it's not just a matter of brewing a beer you would normally brew and throwing some Belgian yeast in.
Right.
You know, this is a really good example of that, I think, because it's so dominated by the yeast character, and you would not get this by just throwing some Belgian yeast in a blonde ale that you brewed.
Right.
This has more of a bready malt flavor to it, but still dry. And
yet also has the Belgian characteristics.
the
that you
Belgian
want, right?
characteristics, and I think a little bit of spiciness from the hops. I think there is some kind of like noble
There
spicy
is,
hop
yeah.
character that comes through in it. And in my mind, getting this balanced the way Zach has it right here is every bit as difficult as balancing an English beer or a German beer or something like that, where you're talking about a delicate thing that just a little bit of imbalance in it can throw it off and make it not.
There's definitely like it's hard to describe how
Right.
delicate the flavor profile
Yeah,
there is.
yeah.
It's like cotton candy. It's if there's too much sugar, it's going to be harsh and crunchy. If there's too little, it's going to be, like light tea, whereas this is like fluffy.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good description of it, I think. And where, say you're drinking a Pilsner or something like that, where you expect that beer to taste the same from the beginning to the end, and every pint that you have should taste the same. This, as you're sitting there drinking it, and it warms up and it opens up within the cup, it changes the impression you get every time you take a drink.
It goes from being a little more soft, light to a little more floral as it
Yeah,
gets warmer.
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah, if you read the actual styled comments and whatnot, they talk about this having an almost lager-like character and gives it a clean profile in comparison to many of the other styles. And they also say that it's a relatively recent style development compared that was created to further appeal to European Pils drinkers. because it's more heavily marketed and whatnot. But like you have that concept of like you're saying like a Pilsner. There you go. That's your point right there. You're saying here's something that's a lot like a Pilsner. It's just a Belgian version of something with all the character that you want from the yeast and everything. It still has that nice bready, malty profile to it, and is soft and easy to drink and clean all around the edges too.
Yeah, and
it's not messy at all.
To draw the
like some of
parallel
others.
to the Pilsner, Pilsner malt, while it has a signature taste and it is in there, that's not the focus of what the
Right.
Pilsner is. The spiciness and the complexity you get from the hops is really
Right.
the heart of that style.
And even here, it's like Sots type and Steering Goldings, East Kent Goldings, but the Sots especially. I mean, if you think about what you have there, there's something that's very familiar in the same range. So like you're sort of almost making a Pilsner here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's I'm sure a water profile thing. They don't have really a good comment about that in the the guidelines, but to me it sounds like you want a softer water profile for something like this to get the best out of what you're probably making for this beer.
I wouldn't be surprised if water profiles on classic examples are all over the place.
Yeah, true.
Because it's just whatever's flowing by whatever farmhouse that the thing started in, and they could be, not that Belgium is a very big country, but
I think honestly this might have been one that kind of popped up later in terms of that versus, you know what I'm saying, is like they want something that's a drinkable, easy to market style. Well, if it's true based off the history, it might have been one that's out there, might have been working one way, but I think they might have geared it all towards being sort of more like that Pilsner approach. I mean,
in my mind, though, the only thing easy to drink about this is that the alcohol is low.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of
It's fresh,
being a very
crisp.
unfamiliar flavor and being something it's very different from anything you've had and maybe difficult to introduce to people that aren't used to it. I think this might be one of the harder Belgians to introduce to somebody, personally.
You think?
Yeah, just because the yeast character is so central to it, and the reason I say that is because in the past, when I've not had this beer for a long time for exactly that reason. Years ago when I first tried it, it kind of put me off because I'm like, what the hell am I tasting? I can't wrap my mind around this, what it is. Where, like a triple, for example, I'd give a triple to my mom, and she would like it. Now, the high alcohol makes it a little difficult to drink,
Dangerous,
but
yeah.
it's a little crisper, drier. The yeast is not as just exploding out of it like
So you think the
this is.
sweetness and the yeast prevalence is something that might be a little too much for some?
I
Because
just
like
think,
this Leffy, to me, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
a good summer beer right
I
there.
agree now. Now that I drink this again, it's been years since I've had this. I drink this again, I think, why haven't I been buying this? I mean, this is really fantastic. I love it.
Honestly, this reminds me a lot of the. I cannot pronounce the name of the beer. It's a like Franzen Hafenweisen.
Franciscaner?
Probably yes. We always called it.
It
Frank's.
does remind me of Franciscaner a little bit. Yeah, you're
We
right.
always called it Frank's because it was easy to pronounce that way, and we're like, it's the one with the guy on the bottle.
No, you're
guy,
right.
But we got it. We even got it while we were overseas, and it came in 16-ounce bottles, and everyone was drinking it for a while, not knowing that it was a really specialty kind of beer.
And I think that's because there's a very strong banana component to it, and that Franciscaner is much more of a banana flavor to it and less of the clove phenols that you'll get in like Polana or something like that.
Yeah.
I agree. That's
It's
a
an
really
easier to
good
drink version.
observation. I think that does taste a lot like it.
See, like what you were saying about this being approachable, to me, a classic example of something that a lot of people find approachable. Like a lot of people like Blue Moon, and then they try Hoegaarden, right? I've never been a huge fan of that beer,
Me
especially
either,
the first
yeah.
time I tried it. But like if this were the first one that I tried instead, I would have definitely been happy to have this because there's such a vast difference. The phenolics are so much more tame.
Yes.
And the clove is so like there's not really a clove character to this. It's just it's that right balance, which I think is the first thing that when I first tried Belgians, I fell in love with. Like, wow, there's so much complexity in that.
But
I'm not even sure what I'm tasting right now, but it's like
That's
nice
exactly
and even
right.
across the board. There's so many things going on, but it's not too much of anything. This beer is like that to me. That's I think what maybe the Belgian blonde character really should be is like there's a lot going on, but there's not too much of anything.
That's a really good way of putting it, I think. And to me, that's why I think some of these, because there's a lot going on and it's hard to pinpoint what it is unless you're an experienced taster, that can kind of throw people off sometimes. they'll either like it or don't like it, but they don't know why.
Right.
You know, because it's not like anything you've ever tasted. Name me another food or anything that tastes anything like this.
Right.
You know, it's
right. But yet, I think this beer would go well with just about anything.
Right.
You know.
right.
And then, which is saying something about a great beer, that it's not doesn't have to be too clean, too dry, or anything else. This thing seems like it would sit well across the board, whether you're having barbecue or
Yeah,
sushi.
I agree with you on that.
You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but like to make one, Zach, you said, what was your grain bill again?
It was mostly Pilsen malt. Let's see real quick. Some Belgian wheat and aromatic. It's a half pound of aromatic, half pound of Belgian wheat, and 11 pounds of Pilsner.
What was the yeast or the hops?
Hops are Hallertau and Magnum.
All right. Well, still within the range of what the others are, with the between like the style says like a Satzer type Styrian Goldings or East Kent Goldings.
Yep.
You're still well within the same range of things that have that same profile. I think, you know.
And clear candy sugar. There's like 2 pounds of that. Nice.
And that's what they mention here: Belgian Pils malt, aromatic malts, sugar, and the Belgian yeast strains that produce complex alcohol, phenolics, and perfumey esters.
And I think the Belgian candy sugar has a lot to do with it too. You can't just use regular
Right.
sugar.
Table sugar's out, and
Well,
corn
we
sugar's
we
out.
talked about that when we were talking about the triples. You want something that's a
The invert.
monosaccharide, that'll ferment out real dry, because really it's one of the things about the taste of this beer is, although it is very dry, the esters and phenolics out of the yeast can give it an impression of sweetness. So if you don't make sure you dry it out really well, it's going to taste real sweet.
Right.
I think so. That's one.
Did
of
you
the,
do you remember if you used a clear or like one of the lower?
Clear.
Oh,
clear?
yeah,
Okay.
have to be clear for this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know they have a lower like lava bond version of that, and I wasn't sure if you went further into that.
And you know, if you're
golden,
using if you're using clear, it's perfectly okay to use the like rock candy kind, or
Right.
or just regular old corn sugar. You don't have to get the expensive liquid stuff. I think with a couple other styles, maybe like a Belgian Golden Strong or something like that, the expensive clear stuff might make a little bit of a difference. But with this, I think you're fine just with corn sugar or that, I don't know, what do you call that stuff? The rock candy kind.
It's candy with an I. I think.
candy sugar. With
Just
an
candy
eye,
sugar, yeah, but it's dry candy sugar. Yeah,
They have
it's
the
like rock
they have the
candy.
soft, and then they have the candy sugar. So
yeah.
typically that's what we carry in the shop anyway.
Yeah.
You know, one of those plus like the syrup comes in a bag version that's from it's going to be a branded version of that.
Yeah, and that is a little more expensive. That's like $8 a pound.
Yeah.
And there are some styles of beer where I think that is useful.
And
to
they're
buy
worth
that
it
particular kind.
for
Yeah,
what
they're
they are,
really well
yeah.
made. Belgian Golden in particular, I think that.
But
that
even the
clear
darks
liquid.
can add a lot. I mean, that's something that if you're making
I'm
a dark
talking about when you're talking
strong-
about neutral sugar,
right,
with
right.
no flavor in it. Yeah, when you get into the darker stuff,
Yeah.
the liquid stuff, absolutely.
I think what you're
is-
saying about the clear and the golden, both of them have a very minimal impact as
Yeah.
far as that goes. Like it's adding color more than any kind of flavor or anything like that. While the darker ones definitely add flavor.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and that quad that Stubby does is a perfect example of that. I mean, there's no specialty grains in it. It's just the dark stuff, and it's just such a complex.
Even using that for, I know they use some of the same for, say, like Doppelbox and whatnot, like the Samichlaus. I've seen that in
Oh, do
recipes
they use
for
that?
that. You know,
Okay.
I've seen it in recipes, and it's one of those things. It's like they managed to nail the concept of how to use those simple sugars, and it's again about the simple sugar. You know,
Right.
added usually in secondary, if possible. I think to get the best out of it. So, but I think it's a really good style. The commercial examples, and I thought for sure I'd find it the Affligem, Affligem Blonde, and it's spelled blonde.
Used to be very easy to
BLOND
find. Yeah.
is typically the Belgian version. There's a BLONDE, like most of them that'd be other styles.
Blonde.
La Trappe, Affligem, Gem, and Leffe are the ones that I have definitely seen on the shelf in Texas. So I know that those are very commonly found.
Leffe you can find almost
Yeah,
anywhere.
Leffe you can find,
Yeah.
and it's a great beer.
It's
So,
ubiquitous.
yes, ubiquitous.
And
I really enjoy that beer. Now they also have Grimbergen or Bergen, I'm not sure which, and Valdieu Blonde, and
in Nurgen, Bergen, Durgen.
I haven't I haven't seen those, but
You haven't seen any Nurgenbergen?
Nurgenbergen.
It's a
Yeah.
Swedish. Nurgenbergen.
Swedish Belgian.
Yes.
Wait, that does exist already, so I shouldn't say anything.
Swelgen.
But yeah, I think this is a really good style. One thing that they say about it is that it might give you the impression that it's been spiced with something probably in the boil, and it has not been typically. And if you do use something like that, to really be minimal with that kind of characteristic.
Yeah, I think that's a real good point, because if you taste this Leffe, and if you told me there was spices in it, I'd believe you. But I think if you tried to replicate this flavor by using like actual cloves and coriander and that kind of thing, I don't think it would come out
Paradise
right.
seeds, even for the lemony.
Paradise, yeah.
No, I don't see that happening as easily. I think this is all about the fermentation temperature of the yeast, and then your base grains that you use for this.
How did you do your fermentation, Zach?
64 and then raised to 68, I think, over a few days.
Okay, well, that's pretty low then. So that must be a very expressive yeast just on its own without having to get hot. That's another misnomer I think about some of these Belgian yeasts, and I think it comes from that Belgian saison yeast, which a lot of people will get real hot to get it to finish out. Some people will think that for Belgians you got to have them at 85 degrees or something like that, and I disagree.
No.
They're not brewing them like that in Belgium.
Yeah, we've been over that. It's like it's forgiving, which helps a new brewer.
Right.
But it's not something like this beer. This beer would. I don't think this is a new brewer beer. You're not going to get what you want to get if you were to try to make this beer at home.
No.
And doing everything without more control over your whole process. I think you're going to, I'm not going to say fail, but I think you're going to find that there's going to be something, it's going to be too dominant in a certain character, like the yeast characters have become too dominant. There's going to be too much off flavor possibly. There might be too much alcohol, it might get too dry even if you did this at room temperature versus, say, a controlled fermentation, cooler.
I have a feeling this is going to be one of those things that is definitely an advanced beer.
As long as you have the controls in place, this is one of the beers that I've been able to brew consistently every time well.
Yeah, but you have to really have...
But you have controlled
I do have
temperature
temperature control, yes.
Right.
Temperature control.
How many times you...
I don't think temperature control should be considered an advanced technique.
No, you're right, but
probably not. But
for a first time beginning stages, it is advanced.
Right.
Like don't go after this. Go after an ale. Go after another kind of ale instead of this. I know that's why I said another kind of ale.
Your face is an ale.
You're an ale hole.
I still consider myself to be
Suck
in
it, ale hole.
the beginnings of being a professional home brewer. In that I still am working on finding proper temperature control, finding
It should be your
the
number
right
one
yeast,
priority.
Yeah,
finding what temperatures are best for each yeast.
Yeah.
And
there's still a lot of people that are looking for what you want to do with
Yeah.
those temperature ranges, and even get that down first before you get into something like this, which is not going to treat you as well. Say, I think a saison would treat you better with a less controlled version than this would, and you'd be happier with it in the long run. So. Zach, how many versions did you go through before you got to this recipe, or is it the same one that have you always used the Brewing Classic Styles recipe, or?
I started with the Brewing Classic Styles and tweaked slowly over time.
Like, what were you looking for?
Honestly, until I brew so much different things, I couldn't tell you. I mean,
damn it, Zach.
I know. Sorry, not much help here. But I'll brew one thing and then I'll brew the Belgians for a little while. The one thing I haven't been able to nail is a double.
Right, those are hard, man.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even.
Oh, really? That's one I've had a lot of success
I can't
with,
even
actually.
come close. I need to get a recipe from you then.
And that Fermentus Abbey yeast is perfect for double. It's really forgiving. It's low in esters and that's one I've had a lot of luck with, actually. We've got someone is asking. I've been slacking on my brewing lately. What do you recommend for me? I think you should brew more. Jen and Will Alba, that's asking. I don't know what you're asking us there, but if you've been slacking and you're looking for a recommendation, I think it's stop slacking. Personally,
or if choose styles that you can handle, and then brew a bunch of those first before you tackle anything that's more exotic. I guess
brew at night, stay up real late, go to work hungover.
So what we do,
yeah,
or just do it on the weekends.
But yeah.
So let's move on to Trappist Single, which
And-
is a style I'm even less familiar with.
Yeah, this one's actually, I think most people are going to be less familiar with because this one is actually not an easy to find beer on a whole. I've got what I think are 2 examples of that I could pick up right now, whereas I found a couple of, there were more examples of the blonde than there were of a Trappist Single, which.
Well, if you look
If
at
you
the
want
commercial
to-
examples here, you've got St. Bernardus, Westmalle, and West Vleteren.
Right.
I mean, when West Vleteren is on there, you know that they've, you can only go to Belgium and get that, really.
Yes.
So,
These I did not have. None of these were where I was looking for these. So I think with these, one thing I wanted to say, that's why I picked the 2 to put together, was out of what you have, Belgian Pale Ale, which is pretty common. There are a lot of versions of that to find, especially when they're not actually marked as a blonde or something, which is definitely something you'll see at the stores. You'll see that they seem like they should be the same. Both of those down there.
both of them. Okay.
They seem like they should be the same thing. They're pretty close. Like a blonde is maybe something that's made with one yeast version, whereas a single would be the same recipe type of beer but with another yeast version, and yet they're not, but they're like within that same range of of what they're.
Sorry.
Thank you, Brandon.
Got carried away. Compare.
I think they're like within that same range of something that you're getting there, but like that's something that they actually say here is like that's a contested concept of that, Overall impression: a pale, bitter, highly attenuated, and well-carbonated Trappist ale, showing a fruity, spicy Trappist yeast character and a spicy floral hop profile, and a soft, supportive, grainy, sweet malt palate. Let's see. Versus a moderate strength golden ale that has a subtle, fruity, spicy Belgian yeast complexity, slightly malty, sweet flavor, and dry finish. How close would you? That's pretty close to the same description on a whole, except for the fact of Trappist may not be the same. Well, look at that. Foaming up.
Provocative.
Look,
It's a very
someone
wide head right
spewing.
Yeah. Look, here we go. It's making me uncomfortable.
But you've got
It's hard to focus.
You've got 4.8 to 6%, and then the other one is 6%. Like the blonde was 6 to 7.5%, and the Trappist Single is 4.8 to 6%. So like it's a smaller version. It should still have all the yeast character, and all I could find was something that's from Save the World here, but they're calling it a Potter's Beer, which is not exactly the same thing, but it's pretty damn close, I would think. Don't lick it, Brandon.
I'm not gonna lick it. I won't lick it.
You're live. Like
And then what's the other one I have? What's that?
We've got a Chimay here, which is the
This is something that the
Doré.
the
ale brewed
description
with
sounds
spices.
similar. So I was like, all right, well, we'll see what we have here. I don't know for sure. That was what the
This
closest
was,
thing I could find at a Total Wine here, which
best
is probably my best
by
selection.
September 5th, 1978. So
Excellent.
Should be a very good or very
Yeah.
terrible bottle.
no, actually, this is probably pretty fresh.
But the yeast character of the Trappist yeast should stand out more of these guys, and then the similar grainy sweet malt, So again, we're coming kind of close to, I think, a Pils character. Let's see. Not labeled or available outside the monastery, infrequently brewed. Might also be called a monk's beer or brother's beer, which is like the potter's beer. That's why I'm choosing that one. Highly attenuated. And then, let's see. Tradition of brewing a lower strength beer as a monk's daily ration, or the bitter pale beer style that describes as relatively modern invention. So, and that's again, Potter's beer was the monk's daily ration. So, that
So
is a very
basically, it's
frothy
saying
head.
don't count on ever finding this beer anywhere outside of Belgium.
I know that
Because
it's
no
one
one
that
will.
came up in styles. It seems like in the last decade, this one started showing up more and more because it's been out there, but it's not been widely available. But more and more historians have been finding more of the beer styles that are there available and trying to get them put out so that we can find them and have them in the style guidelines. So.
Well, I'll tell you this: based on the description you just read, that Save the World is spot on. I think the herbal, floral character, spicy, is dead on without the bubblegum, banana, anything like that. It's very, very dry.
I know what it tastes like, but I don't want to say it out loud until Greg actually tastes it.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
vagina.
Vajun.
It does not, sir. It
It
does not.
tastes of the very finest Vajun.
Now that he's tasted it, I think it tastes very
Clean,
purple.
well kept.
It tastes purple.
Did you say purple?
It tastes purple.
You didn't want to say purple before he drank it?
No.
Is there LSD in there?
Man, you were doing so good. And
It
then you
tastes-
came with purple.
It tastes like the
Like purple drank?
Damn it, Chris.
yeah.
This tastes like purple drank.
The artificial grape is what I get off of it.
Tastes
First.
like that lane.
You know, actually,
There
I
is a
do get what you're
grapiness.
saying.
I know what you're saying.
I understand what you're saying there now that you say that.
It's
I
that
think that's
artificial grape
that's
flavor.
that's actually the malt. I
Yeah.
think more than anything with the Trappist behind it probably.
and I get that flavor just initially.
I've had that out of pills more than once. That sort of grapey.
It tastes like if you were sleeping with Grimace.
that great tussin.
Yeah. Actually,
That
Zach
is what I
needs
was
Zach
going
needs
for, yeah,
some.
right there.
That kind of
need
ruined
some
it for
more.
me, actually, now that you said that.
I'm sorry.
Because I was
you
really
said
enjoying
sleeping
it.
with Grimace. I'm pouring another cup.
Right, I've always wanted to do
It's
that.
kind of like when you're a kid and you went
The
to the
grim
McDonald's
doggy dog.
playground and you got to climb up into the big mouth of the hamburger guy. Not the
Hamburger.
Hamburglar, no, the other
Really
one.
dating
Oh, Mayor
yourself.
McCheese?
Mayor McCheese. You got to climb into Mayor McCheese, and then Grimace was sort of just a side character. It's like, who didn't want to climb into Grimace?
Is that where the bad touching happened?
You could tell
I mean-
because Grimace is overweight, he'll just do a lot of things that others won't. He's more eager. You know? Did we just cross a line? I think we did.
Oh, the Belgians. I think every episode we've done this summer for Belgians has turned out somehow
I
weird.
think we may have just figured out why my Uber rating dropped
Just
last
a little
week.
bit.
Yeah. I may have said something like that on the way home. I don't
Maybe,
know. There's no way of knowing.
I think the Chimay, it's definitely not quite, it's not the same beer. So I wasn't sure about the Chimay when I picked
Well,
it up.
it's got spices added to it, so
But it feels like it's in the same range. It's just definitely not the same beer.
yeah, I
you
would
know?
agree with that.
Whereas like like the Save the World, I'm enjoying a lot because it tastes like Grimace.
I'm
One
sorry that
night
you know
with
what
Grimace. That's what it should be called. One night with Grimace.
One
Not
night in Grimace.
Lush
and you-
Mundi. That's a Potter's beer.
But
You can,
the other
Grim-
one,
Grimace is like, call me daddy.
how do you brew it like that when you're thinking about Grimace and saying, call me daddy? That's
Well, now that I got past what Chris said about it tasting purple, which, he said that, and I'm like, oh, damn it. Now I
you've
get that.
ruined it.
Now that I've had a few more drinks and I've got past that, I really like it a lot. I would drink a lot of that, actually.
Again, Pilsner malt, Trappist yeast, Sacher type hops, like a top fermented Belgian Trappist interpretation of a German Pils.
Mm-hmm.
So the Pils reference comes up again because it's definitely got a lot of soft character to it. Pale, hoppy, and well attenuated.
The hop character is definitely a signature. It's far more present. You get a lot more of the floral and herbal hop flavor out of it, I think.
Right, which the Trappist, is typically cleaner. It usually has that nice yeast character range. It's just a much more tame version of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which that's the thing with, to me, this and a blonde. I was like, these kind of fit within the same range, but there's a good argument against what they are not being the same thing. They're definitely not the same. There's a lot more dryness to this, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, they're very dry.
And
And,
then
you know,
the
it's kinda
alcohol
hard
even
to-
less.
It's kind of hard to know, do these fit in with some of the other classic examples, because we're not going to get Westmalle and we're not going to get West
Right.
Flatiron. St. Bernardus, we can get the Ab 12, but I don't know about...
I thought about flying to the
Any of
brewery
the others.
yesterday
Yeah.
and beating the shit out of a monk or two to take their daily ration away, but then I decided against it.
You got to
so.
watch out. A lot of them know karate.
I think that's a
If
Kung
you
Fu
think-
monks of
If you-
Belgian.
I've
Belgium.
seen a lot of movies, and if you think you're just going to walk in there and karate them, they'll karate you back, dude.
Dude, I've
gotta-
been practicing some karate in the garage.
Well, that
So,
helps. That
I
helps
know.
a lot. Yeah.
A lot. I've been practicing a lot of karate in the garage. I dream about it.
But I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier with the blondes, and that I think every time I drink a really well made Belgian beer, especially the ones that come from Belgium, because I don't know that there's many people or breweries in America that do them as well as the true Belgians.
Right.
I think that this has a connotation of being any of these Belgians have a connotation of being an easy style to brew, and I think while there's something to that, it shouldn't lead to you being lazy in the way you brew them. You should still be looking at every aspect and being intentional and trying to hit specific flavor profiles and all that, just like you would with any other beer. Instead of just, I have a beer and I'm going to throw some Belgian yeast in it. Belgian. I'm interchanging Belgian and Belgium a lot here.
You are.
It's all right. My Uber driver will forgive
Here's a
me.
history. While Trappist brews have a tradition of brewing a lower strength beer as the monk's daily ration, the bitter pale beer style describes a relatively modern invention reflecting current tastes. And then I didn't get to this earlier. West Vleteren first brewed theirs in '99 and replaced older, lower gravity products. Because I think the first versions of the Potter's beer concept was much smaller. Like it was more like a 2%, 3% type of beer. Just enough to get through like fasting. And it was
safer to drink than water, basically.
And
it was a table beer.
Yeah, it's same concepts. Not like a Doppelbock necessarily, which was also meant to get through a month, a month, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, month of fasting. Lent's about a month, right?
It's a month, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So
It's
time
a
of
Wednesday to a
fasting, or just to help you get, brew this, less food, a little bit of this, all those things, liquid food and this together without getting, lit.
So
Schnockered.
we've got Josh here on
Schnockered.
Facebook asking, he says it notes some honey character in the guidelines for the single. Assume that's from the Belgian Pils. Was thinking of hitting my single with a touch of honey to give me an edge and a little carafoam because I'm lazy and I don't want to step mash. Two things there. If you want a little bit of honey flavor, I would put a little bit of honey malt instead of honey. Honey ferments out almost completely. If you want any honey flavor in it, you've really got to put that in a few days into fermentation if you're going to expect any of the flavor to carry over. And it's much easier to just put a few ounces of honey malt in there.
And he's right about a few ounces too, because it goes a long way.
Yeah, just a few ounces is fine if you just want to touch of flavor in there. As far as carafoam, I don't know how that's related to step mashing.
Well, he's going to have more head retention. He should get more of that foamy.
Yeah. Today's malts, you're doing a protein rest on pills. I don't know how much that affects the head character. I've done protein rests before in my mash, and I don't know that it had a whole lot of effect on it. Carafoam would be a good way. If you want more head, that would be the way to do it. I wouldn't step mash for head retention, personally.
Right. And like we mentioned earlier, the IREX malts, you're not going to need to do the step mashes with a lot of these to really get what you want out of them. You're still going to get what you want.
Yeah.
If you're really focused on getting a lot more head retention, a touch carafoam, carapils, whatever, is going to help. It's not going to hurt it at all. So it's
personally, I would rather put a little bit of wheat in there.
Right, and that's another concept. But
because carafoam and carapils are going to put dextrins in, which will help with head retention, but they'll also affect the flavor in terms of unfermentable sugar that's going to be left in there. For a style like this where you need to dry it out, I would never put a dextrin malt in there.
You have a good point
I would put something in that had higher protein like wheat.
What's a dextrin?
Dextrins are unfermentable sugars. Yeah. So when you're talking about carapils or carafoam, they're putting in unfermentable sugars, which are long chain sugars.
Okay.
And the yeast can't ferment them, and it'll add body and sweetness to it. And that's really what they're for. Carafoam is for head retention, but it does it through dextrins. I would use something that added some protein. Protein adds to that head retention, and so wheat is a good one for that.
Right. But you don't want to go too far with it because it would change the body if you use too much of it. So you want to typically a 5-gallon batch, a half pound a wheat is the standard. So,
I wouldn't even use that much.
Yeah,
I would
think
just use
for
a few
this
ounces.
style, you want to go less because it's a small beer. So
one of the things too you got to remember is that all of these Belgian styles have higher carbonation, especially when you get into these. So your head retention is going to be better anyway because it's going to have a lot of foam in it. I would be careful about adding things that add head because it could be too much.
The thing you're thinking about the yeast you're using, which Belgian yeast likes to chew through everything, And it's one of those things that you're probably going to have what you need as long as you made your recipe right. You know, in the long run, you're going to have like Zach's beer when he opened it earlier, that blonde. I mean, between the two, very similar. I'd say when he opened that, it didn't crawl out of the bottle like the Save the World did. But when he poured it in our cups that weren't hot cups or anything like that, they were it has a very full head retention.
And that's a good thing. You want that high carbonation with these styles.
So, and bottle conditioning also helps a lot with that. That's another thing that would help quite a bit. So, you know, and then, again, Belgians typically.
That's why so many of them are corked and caged
Exactly.
in big, heavy bottles, is because of the high carbonation.
Like
That high carbonation adds to the perception of dryness, so that makes a big difference. You know, Matt talked about it a lot when he was in here for the Saisons, that the dryness and the carbonation are key. He thought that those were key over yeast character. And I agree with him, because you can always have a beer with great yeast character, and it's not going to be a great Saison or a great Belgian. You've got to have that carbonation. It has to be there. It's a must.
They're a hand-in-hand thing to me. It's like one without the other is not going to work as well. I mean, but of course, Belgian yeast, depending on what it is, it's going to always lend a lot of flavor compared to regular ale
That's
yeast.
just going to happen.
Yeah. So English or
you have
American,
to really try to get that carbonation.
They're not the same thing, but with the carbonation, that's a wholly different beer. If it's anywhere near typical carbonation range, you won't enjoy it the same way. So, but I think that covers the.
I believe so.
I think with the Potter like this, the let's just call it a single or a Potter's beer. I don't want to say that they're the same thing, because there might be a distinction that we're not getting on this as far as the actual historical concept of it. Definitely look up the histories of this. Look into the style. I know I've seen more of these showing up in like Zymergy and whatnot, different versions over the last few years. So you're going to find some different recipes, some different ways to brew this. If this is what you want to do, you want to aim it at that, do a little research first and make sure that you're getting something that's in the correct range. Because if you're submitting this for judging, just remember that they're not commercial styles that are easily available for anyone to really try. We're all reading this more or less.
But that doesn't mean you can't brew a good one.
Exactly. But just remember that there will be, when you get it judged, be cautious with this one.
Yeah,
it's going to be a minute before we all get a chance to like have more of these showing up in the marketplace. So.
Yeah, you're going to deal with judges that are just going off the guidelines. They're not going to have tasted commercial examples, and that's just part of it. You know, you just have to know that. So, all right. Well, on that note.
In upcoming episodes, we're going to keep recording our Facebook Live version on shows on Friday nights, like tonight, first time. Hopefully you guys, it was good for everybody. We're going to keep trying to do this. It's going to be closer to 6:45 or 7 if we can get our shit together. Also, hopefully we can make sure that we always have more hosts available on a Friday night, and that's why we're doing this.
Even though we had less available this Friday night.
This is unusual, actually.
Man,
next time around,
so bad I'm gonna pee my pants.
Well, go.
All right,
next
come and
time
brew
around,
it.
Go.
Next time around, we're gonna have Rabbit Hole Brewing in the studio again to help us discuss a topic that we've been wanting to hit for a while, which is lighter lagers. They just put out one, and we're gonna have a good discussion with Matt and Tom. So, again, be sure, please, to check out our Patreon account at patreon.com/Come and Brew Radio to help support the show. We have multiple options because every little bit counts, and we want to reward you while help keeping the show going, getting you all involved, and improving it. So, Chris?
Thanks again for listening to Come Brew Radio. Be sure to share with your friends on social media, give us some ratings on iTunes and Stitcher, and send any ideas or comments to info@texasbrewinginc.com. Also, you can check in on the brew days of the guys at their brew-focused Facebook pages at Brew with Stubby, at Brew with Brando, at Brew with Mikey B, at Brew with Pete, and at Brew with Greg.
We could make an at Brew with Chris soon, too, since he's been doing some interesting stuff in the background that we should throw out there. So, otherwise than that, guys, come and brew it.
Come and brew it.
Cheers.
Come and brew it.
Come and brew it. There he is.
Okay, guys, I'm ready to do more podcasting now.
Thanks, mumbling things.
I thought that was good.
There's a sequel